can make God credible again in the earth. You say that's not our responsibility. It is our responsibility. That's why it's the major commandment, guys. We can't take the name of the Lord in vain. Wouldn't it be awesome if the Lord could just be blamed for what he actually has done and said? But that's not what's happening. What's happening in this last 100 years is in the name of God, we keep saying things on his behalf that he's never said. You go down into San Francisco today, and you find me one person that will tell you, I'm angry at Jesus. At something he said? No, it'll never be something he said. Because I hang out in an equally liberal city in Milwaukee and Madison where we live to this area. I mean, even by the stats, it's equal. Especially Madison. You can't just say in Milwaukee, well, I heard it, Jack Van Impe said. You know what I mean? Jack Van Impe. I heard it on TBN, brother. You need to listen to me. This does not work where we come from. This works in the Bible Belt. This is not, that kind of stuff does not, it's like, they don't care who Jack Van Impe is. So, I went a little longer than expected, but here we go. Let's listen to this. It puts quite a responsibility on believing people, Rowan Williams says, of course. It'd be much nicer for all of us if we could just rely on arguments, not on the uncertainties of human lives. But nonetheless, the remarkable fact remains. Some people throughout history do take responsibility for making God credible in the world. This turn of phrase about taking responsibility for God I owe to one of the most striking believers of the 20th century, one of the many who made God believable by their resistance to the nightmares of modern totalitarianism and violence. I may not pronounce this correctly, but Eddie Hillesum was a young Jewish woman. From here on out, I'll just refer to her as Eddie. In her 20s, when the Germans occupied Holland. And not a pious or conventional person at all, not someone with an explicit religious commitment. Her published diaries and letters from 1941 to 1943 show how, during the terrible period in the history of her country and her people, she became more and more conscious of God's hand on her life. At a time when most would have been likely to feel more deeply skeptical about God, imprisoned in the transit camp at Westerbork, before being shipped off to Auschwitz, where she was to die in the gas chambers in November 1943 at the age of 29. She wrote in her diary, quote, "There must be someone to live through it all and bear witness to the fact that God lived even in these times. And why should I not be that witness?" In a letter to a friend from Westerbork, she described her life as having become an uninterrupted dialogue with you, O God. And she could write of sensing her vocation in the camp as being, quote, "not simply to proclaim you, God, to commend you to the heart of others. One must also clear the path toward you in them." It's plain that she saw her belief as a matter of deciding to occupy a certain place in the world, a place where others could somehow connect with God through her, and this not in any self-congratulatory spirit or with any sense of being exceptionally holy or virtuous. but simply because she had taken and agreed to take responsibility for God's believability. It's like got Jesus on the boat with the wind and the waves, and they're coming over the boat, and Jesus says to his, and Jesus is sleeping, and the disciples are freaking out because they think they're going to die. And Jesus calms the wind and the waves. We got the flip of it. So Jesus is sleeping when the wind and the waves are coming over the boat, and we got the flip of it in Gethsemane where Jesus is trying to keep his disciples awake, and they keep on falling asleep because something eternal is going down. And for the most part, as long as I can remember, even though I completely believe in the prophetic and long for it, but most of what we have is prophecies about wind and waves. And we can't really stay awake for that which is eternal. Jesus is calling us. I mean, guys, I don't want to make our situation in America light, okay? I'm not trying to do that. But Eddie is a 29-year-old girl on her way to die in Auschwitz. And she doesn't want to do anything but just let people know through her writing that God was alive even in these times. And become a place that people could come home to recognize he was alive even in those very evil times. Most of what we have today is like, they say, I don't mean to keep coming back to it, but it kind of is a joke. It's like, do you remember it was just a few months ago, a year ago, that people were saying that George W. Bush was like Hitler. And now you got people saying that Barack Obama's Hitler. Who the heck is Hitler? Hitler was Hitler. Come off it. Not to mention, I think that's ridiculous. For both of them, it's totally ridiculous. But, the history will be the judge of me. Maybe George W. Bush and Barack Obama are the next great Hitlers of the world. I don't mean to make light of it, but I think that's a little bit foolish. But we'll see. Keep the tape. And in 30 years from now, we'll roll it back and we'll see. Okay? For those of you that are a little older, have a little bit more sense of history. I don't mean to be like making fun of it, but come on, Christians. Seriously, guys. But let's say Hitler lived today. Don't you want to be Eddie? Do I want to be the guy in history that's known for trying to kill Hitler? Oh, I'm sure that's great. It's wonderful. Hey, they'll make a movie about you. I'd rather be Eddie. Why? Because Jesus is Lord. What do you mean? It's ridiculous. Should we let evil just reign and rule? Evil doesn't reign and rule. No, wait. It does. You got to get it. No. That's what makes evil. That thought right there. That's what makes